Good evening. Terrific. My name is Carlene Burrell-McRae, and I am one of the Associate Deans of Students of the university and the Director for the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. And my job is simply on behalf of the Center for Identity Plus Inclusion and the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs is to simply welcome you to the first of our year-long Heritage Series. People spend a lot of time giving thought about who to bring, why we want to bring folks here, and at the end of the day, it is about bringing people to campus who will celebrate this whole idea of identity, who will celebrate with us what it means to be inclusive, who will celebrate with us the meaning of challenging each other. You know, we are about rigorous debate, is what I hear all the time. But how is it that we stop and listen, really listen to each other, and to think about when that conversation or that engagement is over, have we learned something? Can we grow just a little bit more, even if someone is coming from a very different place? And so our Heritage Series is about being able to introduce people to our community that we can learn from, we can laugh with, and we can challenge each other to be able to grow and be better. So I know you all are not here at all to see me, and we're really, really excited to have Junot Díaz here. So I'm gonna bring up Fernando to introduce him to all of you. So I do hope you enjoy this experience, and welcome again.
Good evening, folks. My name is Fernando Coelho, and I'm a graduate student at the Harris School of Public Policy here at the University of Chicago. I also serve as a graduate assistant at the Center for Identity and Inclusion and the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. I am so pleased to be with you tonight and incredibly honored to have the chance to introduce our speaker today, Junot Díaz. He is joining us tonight from Boston, where he teaches creative writing at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Born in the Dominican Republic and raised in New Jersey, Professor Díaz is perhaps best known for his critically acclaimed Drown, The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, which won the 2008 Pulitzer Prize, and This Is How You Lose Her, a New York Times bestseller and a personal favorite. Professor Díaz has won numerous prestigious fellowships, including the highly coveted MacArthur Genius Fellowship. He is also the co-founder of Voices of Our Nation workshop, whose mission is to develop emerging writers of color through programs and workshops taught by established writers of color. His imagination is unmatched, and his style is frankly irresistible. Some have described it as unapologetic, intrepid, and electrifying. I couldn't agree more. His work contains many, many worlds, all of which he presents with a distinct rawness that is only achievable with careful craft. In his books, we can see the joy and suffering of his characters, and in stories of family, friendship, love, heartbreak, we ultimately learn what it's really like to grow up in America. Lastly, Professor Díaz is just a fascinating person to be around, and we're truly in for a treat today. So I am most honored, and I would be very grateful if you would help me welcome to the stage the wonderful Junot Díaz.
Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you. I reserved some seats for some of my friends. None of them fucking showed. Ingrid showed, yo. I know they're elsewhere, man. They're hiding the fuck out. But yeah, man. Thank you guys for coming. It's a great pleasure. I wanted to thank, of course, the university for having me. I wanted to thank, but it's like the best name of any center. Is it the Center of Identity Plus Inclusion or for Identity? That's some shit right there. I love it. We need, and you guys probably underfund the shit out of them, yeah? I have no doubt. Probably no doubt. Yeah. Lamentable. Yeah. So I wanted to thank the center for having us, and of course having me and all the folks, staff, faculty, students, allies who made this event possible. You guys are very blessed here, the community that you have, who comes together and makes moments like this possible, these kind of gatherings. It's not everywhere where you see people going above and beyond their pay grade to make these things happen. Most of the time, these things come together from people who are doing work far more out of love than from any remuneration. And it is an extraordinary thing. I always say, but it bears repetition, I'm mostly an excuse for you guys to celebrate yourself. You're very blessed. And it's very kind. I'm very grateful to be here. Fernando, for that wonderful introduction. Where'd you go, my brother? Is that it? He's like six-pack? Oh, no, he's there. Yeah. No, those things are nerve-wracking, right? Yeah. I remember when I was a grad student, I had to do my first introduction to somebody, and I super blew it, like, to the point where even my mentor was like, that was terrible. So, yeah, I remember those. Yeah, so yeah, you in for a treat? Yeah, man, so thank you so much. And earlier I met with a group of students. I wanted to thank them for their patience. And of course, y'all, you could be doing anything else, right? I appreciate you being here. How many folks are actually students at University of Chicago? Okay, so lots of you. Yeah, how many folks are not from the university community? Raise your hand. Okay, yeah, it's a whole lot of you too. And some of you sat up front. Word. And there was like a reserve sign there. Is there a school here? Like what kind of school? Is it like a... Wait, raise the hand, the high school students. Oh, shit. Yo, who took you? Where's the teachers, yo? Oh my... Yeah, man. It's really kind of you. My high school teachers didn't take me any fucking where, so it's super great. Well, I mean, God, that's awesome. Normally I would... Did they actually, like, make you read this stuff? Pero no dijeron nada la escuela. La escuela, la administración. No quedaron. Ay, coño, pero qué bueno, escuela. Okay, cool. Good for you guys. Well, it's a pleasure. So listen, young people, if I remember correctly, my memory's super bad, but if I remember correctly, I'm going to try to get the first 3 questions out of you guys, all right? You guys got some stuff you want to bother me with? It's good practice. For real. If you cannot ask a question of some old man writing nerd, you're in trouble. You're going to have to ask questions of people with power, and you want to make sure to be able to smash them. So I'm good practice. All right? All right. Cool. Quickly, anybody here from New Jersey? Anybody? That's all? No noise? They've crushed you? Fuck, they crushed you. Where are you guys from? Montclair, that's my shit. I was in Montclair a week ago. My boy Baye lives there, man. Did you go to Montclair High School? That is like the swirl capital of the world. Word. All right. Montclair. Huh. Cool. All right. Anybody folks from the Caribbean here at all? Recruitment's a little better. Nice. Anybody from Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic? Anybody? Oh, right here. What's up? Yeah, man. They're trying to deport you yet? Yeah. All right. It's like, I feel like we're trying to deport us here and home. Yeah. Okay, cool. Any immigrants here? Less noise. More fucking worry. Yeah. It's fucking country. I mean, we know it. It bears repetition, but one of the most interesting things that we see happening in the United States, and it's, if it wasn't such a horrific, heart-rending, material, inhuman injustice, one might look at it from a sort of a kind of a clinical perspective. But one of the things that's really fascinating about what's occurring these days is that you see this interesting transfer, right? As you watch all of our wonderful neoliberal economic instruments working their damage on us, what's been fascinating to see is the experiment that is sort of being run in all of our countries, which is how much materials, how much of people's sort of life world can we extract from them and compensate them with psychic capital? Like, how much will people tolerate having their social networks, their safety networks, their like, you know, their social welfare, their sort of their own indigenous kind of political systems, their life, you know, the way that we live, the way we, how much of that can we take away, commodify, and compensate with psychic capital, like these kind of bizarre eruptions of insane nationalism? You know, it's like really, really interesting the way that people have been able to, elite actors and sort of the kind of political elites we have in this country have been just fleecing all of us blind and have been repaying us in bizarre psychic capital, like, well, at least you're not an illegal, horrible immigrant. And you see the same thing happen in the United States as in the Dominican Republic. It's fascinating when you're in both countries, where you see political elites that have done absolutely everything to extract all the wealth from all of us, right? And instead of like compensating us in any way that would make sense, they compensate us with these false ideologies, yeah, these false nationalisms. And folks are like the very folks who are like losing all their jobs, who've got no fucking medical insurance, who are getting all jacked up, are the same folks who are sitting around saying, yo, I am gonna mobilize these fucked up politics of nativism. And you see it in the Dominican Republic too. It's really fascinating. The overlap is complete. And I keep wondering, like, how long can people sup off of that incredibly toxic gruel of that kind of nativist psychic capital before people realize that their real sustenance is being drawn from them, and what they're being compensated with is one of the most horrific kind of ways of thinking possible. And being an immigrant has been an interesting place to be when they talk about, you know, they talk about epistemic privilege, like this point where you're at, where you get to learn things about the countries which you inhabit or the places you inhabit. You know, being Dominican and being an immigrant right now is fucking really bananas. Because you see folks in the United States going bananas, like just so happy Donald Trump's around. They're so happy. You'd be amazed how many people are happy. Maybe you're not amazed because you encounter them all the time. And then I go home to Santo Domingo and you've got the homegrown versions of Donald Trump's being like, the problem with the Dominican Republic isn't our political system, which is entirely corrupt. It isn't our political elites, which have robbed the country blind. It isn't the fact that we're absolutely destroying our natural patrimony. It isn't the fact that all this shit has gone wrong because our folks in power have just been diabolical. The problem is immigrants. And it's just the most fascinating sleight of hand legerdemain. And certainly as folks living in this country, this is something that we have to really continue to do what we've been doing, which is to fight against. And I'm always struck by that. You know, and I think being in Chicago, the city that immigration built, is deeply ironic. Whether it's the immigration of black bodies within the country or the immigration of everybody else from the planet across the world, it is an extraordinary place to be an immigrant and to feel as deeply threatened as we are. It is an extraordinary place. Yeah. And so, with that, let's start. Yeah? Let's do a reading, real quick, and then we'll do a Q&A. Yeah? Yeah, you guys want to talk to me about stuff? Some questions? Yeah? Normally I'd read first, but I figure we'll pick on the high school kids. You guys got a question? You want to start with something? Is that a young student there? Please stand up. I will repeat your question for other people.
How did women in your life react to your book? This is how you lose it.
Damn, you just get right in there, yo. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, man. How do the women in my life react to my book, This Is How You Lose Her? You guys clearly read it because you're laughing. Huh. Or at least you read about it. Okay, so you gotta understand, look, gang. You know? No, I mean it. Gang, you're not, anybody who's the same person when they're 20 as when they're 30, that's a lot. That's a lot of work to not change that much. No? I mean, you can do it, but it's sort of heroic. Look, okay, I'll answer the question first and then try to extract the larger context out of it. Most of my ex-girlfriends, which I think is what you're talking about, because my mom doesn't give a fuck. My sisters are like, they're like, I don't give a fuck about that shit, So my ex-girlfriends, most of my ex-girlfriends are kind of like most ex-girlfriends in heterosexual relationships. They're very happy to have escaped you, I think most of us confuse our melancholia, which is kind of the wrong kind of mourning for any actual value of our partner. But yeah, most of my ex-girlfriends were like, I ain't gonna fucking read that book. They're like, I fucking lived with this asshole, so fuck them. But on the other hand, I think that I have women in my life who don't follow under that paradigm that they dated me when I was young. And, what they were interested in was my attempt to address that kind of sort of masculinity. Look, it's in a lot of places, One of the strange things about growing up in a hyper-masculinized Caribbean space, whether in the United States or in Santo Domingo, is that as a boy, you're encouraged. You're absolutely not only encouraged, you're sort of propulsed into compensating for all of your psychic absences with sex. And you can draw a direct line between the hypersexuality of the Caribbean and the fact that the Caribbean spent 300 or 400 or 500 years, depending on who you ask, being raped by its political elites. The majority of them were white plantation owners with a few mulattoes and a few blacks. And then afterwards with the light-skinned political elites like Trujillo, sure, light enough, who basically ran the Dominican Republic like a rapeocracy. And you can't have that much sexual trauma in a place. You don't end up looking like me without there having been centuries of this kind of sexual violence and these kind of just terrifying, malign institutional structures. And I think often enough, cultures that have suffered these sort of plantation economies are the same cultures that have these sort of folkloric identities around hypersexualization. And I think that it strikes me as not an accident that the place that got raped into existence would attempt to somehow integrate that experience into a positive form. Yeah? And so part of my writing about infidelity has a lot to do about the impact, both in a small scale and a large scale, with sexual trauma in a community like ours. So it's hard to kind of talk about. It's not the easiest thing for anyone. But in general, I think of the kids I grew up with, like I'd say 7 friends of mine I grew up with, 2 of them are the only ones who have reported not having been sexually assaulted. And it's a tough kind of place. And how do you form a normal sexual identity when what you're recovering from is usually this vast childhood violation? I'm not saying that that's the only thing that happens in hypermasculinity. It's not. that reductive, but I do think it's something that for me is of interest as an artist. So, of course, some of the women who had been following my project around this also saw that part of the project had to do with that as well. That Junior's problem isn't that he's a cheater. Junior's problem is that this kid's been molested and has great difficulty talking about it. And then he has these other problems that are infidelity and ability to be intimate, etc. And it was that complexity which has been sort of bubbling in my head. Yeah. But still, none of my exes going back out with me. For real. So, one more question from the high school youth, yeah? You already took my teeth out, so finish the rest of it.
We discussed in class about whether Junior is a victim. Victim may good guy or a bad guy. So you as an author, what do you think?
It's a wonderful question. What did you come up with?
When we discussed, I said that he's a victim because certain phrases are made in the book, like how we see the men. For example, one of his girlfriends like only went on the trip with him just to go on the trip, and then after that she left him. So I feel he's a victim in that way. But some people say he's a bad guy because he expects the women to forgive him.
Yeah. It's funny. The best way not to have to integrate what you've done wrong is to want people to forgive you right away. I can always tell things have gone really weird in a relationship with your friends when they're just like, I just want absolution. Fuck having to hold the injury that I have committed. Because absolution is the shortcut. And, that's Junior at that stage. I with that question, I would always think you guys probably have the answer in the question. Yeah, like most of us, we're simultaneously victimizers, victims, neutral observers. We're all of these things at the same time. Of course, in different proportions. Yeah, I don't think Junior is as much a victim as he is a victimizer, but it's probably not useful to sort of parse these things into these polarities. It's far better to understand them as in they're happening all at the same time. What makes life so confusing is that we're usually victimizing people while we're being victimized. And that is why this thing has been if it wasn't that way, we would have had this shit solved. And to add one more wrinkle to this, there's also the temporal question, the time question. What's interesting about many of us is that we're simultaneously here, but we're also in other times. And many of us are fighting fights from when we were kids in our present day life. And so I would argue that some of Junior's victimizing happened in a different temporal period, and some of his victimhood happened in a different temporal period. So he's not just fighting this shit out in the present, he's also fighting this shit out in the past. And that's who we are. We don't exist simply in the now. And that's what makes being us very complicated. Most of us are fucking wrestling with shit when we were 9, 10, 11, 12, even though we're 40, 50, 60. And so that's the other question, is how much of this is in the past and the present, and why does this character always jump back and forth in time? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so let me just read. I actually came up here without my book, so can I borrow a book, yo? Thank you. Yeah, let me try that, and then I'll take another one, and then I'll guess. Thank you. You're so awesome. Nah, I meant it because I always say this, but it keeps happening. People keep throwing the books at me. So when you don't hit me with them, I'm always like very excited. All right, let's read very quickly. Cool. Let's look at this story, yeah? Talking about Santo Domingo. Let's read about Santo Domingo a little bit. Again, young people. Any young people ever go on a trip when you with a person you should have been breaking up with? Anybody? That's the young people. How about us older people? You ever done that? That's the sign you're like a full-grown ass adult. Yeah, you take a fucking trip with somebody you should have dumped. So, that's this story, all right? I'm going to read a piece of it. It's called The Sun, the Moon, and the Stars. And I'm just going to read 3 pieces of it, and I'll just link them together for you, all right? So be patient. Sun, the moon, the stars. I am not a bad guy. I know how that sounds. Defensive, unscrupulous, but it is true. I'm like everybody else. Weak, full of mistakes, but basically good. Magdalena disagrees, though. She considers me a typical Dominican man, a sucio, an asshole, because you see, many months ago when Magda was still my girlfriend, when I didn't have to be careful about anything, I cheated on her with this chick who had tons of 80s freestyle hair. Didn't tell Magda about it either. You know how that shit is. A smelly bone like that, better off buried in the backyard of your life. Homegirl only found out because Magda wrote her a fucking letter. And that letter had details. Shit you wouldn't even tell your boys drunk. The thing is, that particular bit of stupidity had been over for months. Me and Magda were on an upswing then, weren't as distant as the winter when I was cheating. She was coming over to my place, and instead of us hanging out with my knucklehead boys, me smoking and her bored out of her skull, we were seeing movies, driving out different places to eat, even caught a play at the Crossroads Theater, and I took a picture of her with some big wig black playwrights, pictures where she's smiling so much you would think her wide-ass mouth was gonna unhinge. We were a couple again, visiting each other's families on weekends, eating breakfast at diners, going to the library together. A nice rhythm we had going. But then the letter hits like a Star Trek grenade and detonates everything past, present, and future. Suddenly, her folks want to kill me. Doesn't matter that I helped them with their taxes 2 years running or that I mow their lawn. Her father, who used to treat me like his hijo, sounds like he's strangling himself with the phone cord, says, "You no deserve I speak to you in Spanish." And I see one of Magda's girls at the Woodbridge Mall, Clarabelle, the Ecuatoriana with the biology degree and the chinita eyes, and she treats me like I ate someone's favorite fucking kid. You don't even want to hear how it went down with Magda. Like a 5-train collision. She threw Cassandra's letter at me and then sat down on the curb hyperventilating. "Oh God," she wailed. "Oh my God." This is when my boys claim they would have pulled a total fucking denial. Cassandra who? But I was too sick to my stomach to even try it. I sat down next to Magda, grabbed her flailing arms, and said some dumb shit like, "You have to listen to me, or you won't understand." So we jump. So dude is like, him and his girl, he got caught, right? And him and his girl's got this trip to the Dominican Republic that they were going to take together. And he's like trying to, he's trying to cupcake her into taking it. So she ends up saying yes, right? So here goes dumbass, they're landing, right? Let me confess, I love Santo Domingo. I love coming home to the guys in blazers trying to push little cups of Brugal into my hands. I love the plane landing, everybody clapping when the wheels kiss the runway. I love the fact that I'm the only nigga on board without a Cuban link or a flapjack of makeup on my face. I love the redhead woman on her way to meet the daughter she hasn't seen in 11 years. The gifts she holds on her laps like the bones of a saint. Mi hija has tetas now, the woman whispers. The last time I saw her, she could not even speak sentences. Imagínate. I love the bag my mother packs, shit for relatives, and something for Magda, a gift. You give this to her no matter what happens. If this was another kind of story, I would tell you about the sea. What it looks like after it's been forced into the sky through a blowhole. How when I'm driving in from the airport and see it like this, like shredded silver, I know I'm back for real. And I would tell you about how many poor motherfuckers there are, more albinos, more cross-eyed niggers, more tigres than you will ever see. And I would tell you about the traffic, the entire history of late 20th century automobiles swarming across every flat stretch of ground, a cosmology of battered cars, battered motorcycles, battered trucks, and battered buses, and an equal number of repair shops run by any fool with a wrench. And I would tell you about our shanties and our no running water faucets and the Sambos on our billboards and the fact that my family house comes equipped with the ever reliable latrine. And I would tell you about my abuelo and his campo hands and how unhappy he is that I am not sticking around. And I would tell you about the street where I was born, Calle 21, how it hasn't decided yet if it wants to be a slum or not, and how it has been in this state of indecision for years. But that would make this another kind of story. And I am having enough trouble with this one as it is. You're going to have to take my word for it. Santo Domingo is Santo Domingo. Let's pretend we all know what goes on there. So, one more jump. We're almost to the end. So, I don't know, again, people go to the Caribbean. I have friends of mine who are like, I don't like going to resorts. I want to hang out with the authentic people. You ever hear people say that shit? Like motherfuckers, robots run the resorts. I think if people say, when they say that, what they say is, when I'm in the third world, I don't want to encounter my own privilege by being in a resort. But whatever. Do you, you know? So, anyway, my man and this young woman, they're having kind of an argument of ethos about where they want to go. He wants to kind of drive around Santo Domingo because he's so authentic, and she wants to go to a resort. So she wins, all right? This is the last place we join them. All right? By the middle of day 3 of our all Quisqueya Redemption tour, we are in an air-conditioned bungalow watching HBO. Exactly where I want to be when I'm in fucking Santo Domingo, in a resort. Magda is reading a book by a Trappist in a better mood, I guess, and I'm sitting by the edge of the bed fingering my useless map, and I am thinking, for this I deserve something nice. Something physical, yeah? Me and Magda were usually pretty damn casual about the sex, but ever since the breakup shit had gotten weird. First of all, it ain't regular like before. I gotta nudge her to start things up or we won't fuck at all. And she plays like she doesn't want it, and sometimes she does not, and I gotta cool it, but other times she does want it, and I have to touch her pussy, which is my way of initiating things, of saying, so how about we kick it, mommy? And she turns her head, which is her way of saying, I am too proud to acquiesce openly to your animal desires, but if you continue to put your finger in me, I will not stop you. Today we start no problem, but then halfway through, Magda says, wait, we shouldn't. And I want to know why. She closed her eyes like she was embarrassed at herself. Forget about it, she said, moving her hips under me. Just forget about it. We'll leave that there. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I might need them back, but I'll give them back. Thank you. So we'll take a couple more questions. We'll probably go back to reading. I know if I hold them, I will mess the books up. So people have mics. And the people up there have a question? I feel like... Cool. But just in case anyone up there, just scream or something. Cool. We're ready, yeah? You don't want to get up, so go right ahead.
So you talked a little bit earlier about how the city is alive, correct? And I want to know if you thought that, like, people like myself are myself, and there's still like kind of an otherness in that to me, like some pain in the South here, like my family's in the South.
Sure. I mean, of course there's degrees of everything. Internal migrants, it's a very kind of a different context than sort of what we would say traditional, transnational immigration. But I do think it's probably best as well to keep these continuums in place. Because, y'all know the history better than me. Internal migration had its own set of traumas that were unacknowledged and unmetabolized, and continue to be sort of unacknowledged and unmetabolized. And so I do think that there's much to learn. The day we begin to recognize the complexity of our internal migration, perhaps we would be at a place where we begin to understand what it meant to also be a country that had transnational migration. And I think that the two silences overlap. They're concatenating, And certainly there's differences. It's the same thing. When someone migrates from Puerto Rico, it's quite different than when someone migrates from a country where they're not a colony, and so they have all sorts of different bureaucratic identities. But there's still stuff that's going on there. And I think often, for me, what's interesting is how this continuum plays out and how up and down the continuum there can be conversations that are very important to all of us. And part of what makes sort of unity and affiliation difficult is that most of us have a big part of our identities offline. The folks of us who are the children of internal immigrants, if that identity was more in the foreground, I think there would be a much different conversation about immigration in general. But the erasure of that in most of our kind of folkloric conversations about who we are has guaranteed this great distance between migrants and people who are American, where I don't think that distance is quite as great as people who are opposed to immigration would like us to think it. Yeah. Thank you. What else? Yes?
How do you go about choosing the poems or the quotes at the beginning of your books? Are they poems, per se, that you read at one time, that you sort of stay with you, and once you're done with the work, you say this is a good fit? Or do they actually at all impact your stories?
Yeah, I mean, epigraphs are at the beginning of the book. They're sort of like titles. I mean, you got to remember, the business that we're in is that, look, the thing about literature, the thing about fiction, is that fiction can do certain things really well, right? Fiction's awesome about internalities. It's awesome at accessing internal subjectivities. It's super lame at describing movement. Yeah, I mean, we do a not bad job, but I could describe 5 minutes of salsa dancing and show you on film 5 minutes of salsa dancing. I promise you one will be far more explanatory. Because each media has its affordances, and that's okay. Media are supposed to have affordances. We learn to work around them and work with them. For me, part of the attempt to get, the complexity of how books speak to each other, that a book is not in isolation, as we know. I mean, people who do scholarship know that really well, because you just have to look at their fucking footnotes. And you could see books are in communications with each other. Often in fiction, we don't have a lot of opportunity to signal some of the ancestral debts and ancestral conversations that the texts are attempting to engage in. Me, it's a little easier because I try to mention a book every 5 pages. But the epigraphs tend to act as a kind of a forcing place, of a way to begin to think. So a lot of times I'm engaged in a conversation. So for example, Sandra Cisneros. Before I encountered Sandra Cisneros, I had not met any Latina artist because of my reading, because of my exposure, because of canonical sort of bizarre bullshit, who had been writing about our intimate lives, who was writing just about dating. I'd read a bunch of books about the immigrant experience, a bunch of books about being like a migrant worker, but I never read a book where people were just fucking dating, and dealing with what it means to be people of color who were taught that we are not lovable. I mean, you grow up in this country, you grow up in most places in the world, and you're a person of color, you're of African descent, you're Asian. What you're taught is you are not the center of the romantic economy. Yeah? And how do people who come up from this sort of internalized oppression and very external oppression, how do people like us learn to love? When we've been taught that we're not only like not attractive, that we're not the center, and we're taught to love whiteness more than we're taught to love ourselves. I mean, Jesus Christ, if you could take people of color's love of whiteness that gets interjected in them by the colonial complex, you could power a universe with that. You know? The worst universe in science fiction history. And so I was really interested when I encountered Cisneros, who was engaging in all these ideas. And he was writing these stories, and they didn't seem, again, at this time, this was the 80s, and there was this idea of what counted for political writing. It was like when Zora Neale Hurston wrote her novel, The Eyes Watching God, and people were like slamming her because it wasn't political enough, you know? Richard Wright was like, write it in a review and said, she didn't address the Negro question. There's different ways to deal with politics, and the politics of the intimate, the politics of intimacy, I think are very necessary. And I wanted to recognize that if it wasn't for Sandra Cisneros, I would never have found it. Where other communities have had a longer trajectory of writing about this, but for me, it was deep. You know? It's like a small down payment on a debt. Yeah. What do we got? Okay, let's have it. Oh, there's people lined up. I'm sorry. Is that somebody online? Oh, shit.
Is this working? Okay. So my partner is an English teacher at a charter high school where the student body is 96% Hispanic. And they recently banned Oscar Wilde for language and for the use of Spanglish, even though it was the only book written by a Latino author that they'd ever put on their syllabus. So I just wanted to ask, on behalf of him and my own curiosity, what do you know about the way your books are taught, and how do you hope they are?
That's not uncommon. I just got an email. I was going to post it on Facebook because that's like my only social media shit. It's like Facebook. I got an email from a school in Taiwan where this is like a super elite rich school, and they were just like, we're going to ban your book because some people were like, oh, we're upset with the cursing. But half the students are like trying to apply to MIT. So it's weird. They're like, all right, whatever, you know? And you know, one of the things that this article mentioned, and I think it's really important, is that the books that get banned the most, they quoted a really great statistic in this, and I was actually read it this morning and wanted to follow up to kind of get the, you know, the attribution of this. But the article was saying that the books that get banned the most, 50% of it are, 50% of those books are by people of color and sexual and gender minorities. And that banning, this idea of what is respectable, is another way to patrol canon hegemony. People like me are being banned, right, because I curse, but books where 12-year-old children slaughter dozens of other 12-year-old children are permitted. So what's fascinating is, as long as you toe the political line of white supremacy and you don't show the hood too much, chances are you'll never be banned. Yeah? But God forbid you're in any way, not just in any way you're non-conforming, in any way that you represent the true majority of this country. And it's really funny because these are the same parents that are killing to get their kids into colleges. And I wonder who they're protecting. Because really, when parents go out of their way to ban books, they're saying three important things. One, we don't trust our youth. We don't trust our youth, basically. That if youth encounter cursing, as if my book will be the first time they encounter cursing, they don't trust the youth, their own children, they don't trust them. Even, I think, equally tragically, they don't trust their teachers. So what you're trying to tell me is trained professionals are going to approach difficult material, but you don't trust them to do that. And it reveals how fucked up we've become as a culture. Well, we'll trust our politicians to criminally send our young people to their deaths in made-up wars, but we will not trust our teachers to teach a book. And it says everything. And 3, of course, probably equally damaging, is that it just betrays a complete misunderstanding of the way art functions. Yeah? And it's really problematic. And I would argue most of the parents who are doing this, I would say, are either driven by some bizarre religious conviction and equally are the products of our school systems which have denied people arts education. We wouldn't have this fucking problem if our school systems were actually adequately funded and everybody for a couple of generations had arts education. You know, but it's a bind, you know? It's a bind. No, but don't let them play Call of fucking Duty all day long. They will. They'll be like, kill, 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 motherfuckers. Especially if they look Arab or Mexican. Let's go. What else do we got? We have a line?
Hi. I stopped writing fiction because I felt like I was really scared to write about my history. Everything was really messy. It seemed too personal. So I was curious, as both a person and as an artist, what advice you have for young writers of color who struggle to embrace their identities.
Yeah, look, gang, this isn't going to be easy for any of us. To figure out a way to be honest to yourself is as hard when you're dating as it is when you're writing. There's nothing wrong with that challenge. Part of what it is to become an artist, part of what it is to be an artist, is what the great ones always say. You've got to become the person that you need to be to write the book. And you can't speed that. There's no class that you could take. There's no little workshop. You can go to AWP 50 fucking times, do all the little bullshit they tell you to do online, but you cannot falsify that what one needs to produce a work of art is not more skills. What one needs always is more humanity. And that process is very long and very slow and very torturous and doesn't respond to dollars and doesn't respond to career and doesn't respond to your rent needs. And my thing is have faith. As long as you're in that conversation with yourself, you will become that person. But will it happen when you need it? Nope. Will it pay your fucking rent? Nope. But it shouldn't be asked to. Your humanity is not a wage laborer. And she has got other shit she's got to do, yo. You're going to do it. You're going to do it. But you got to, if you would take away the punch clock and take away the fucking chronometer, she'll be much more likely to do what you need her to do. But she will not respond to the whip and she will not respond to the watch. And if she responds to either, what we produced will be a parody of what you need to produce. And that's the hard challenge. Everything in this society is telling you guys, you are a failure already. All that you can do is hurry up and prove to us that you're only a 50% failure by finishing fast, getting the right degrees, getting the right jobs, publishing before you're 21, getting a show before this. None of that is true. You've been set up. We've been set up, yo. The clock prevents you from doing what you need to do. And if I was a young writer, I would be like, give yourself 20 years to do it. And you'll actually relax and do it much faster than if you said, I'll give myself 1 year. She's not going to labor because you demand it. She'll do it when she's safe, she'll do it when she feels free, and she'll do it when she feels loved. And there is no love, none, when there are demands. And that's the truth of it. It sounds like I'm just, let's hold hands. But that's the fucking truth, yo. Good luck. I didn't help.
Thank you.
Okay, we got like 10 minutes. We got to knock this shit out. So I'm going to take like 3 questions at once and answer all 3 because that'll keep me short. Go.
Seeing as you're an artist and your work is always subjected to both praise and criticism, I was wondering what you thought about Junot Díaz and decolonial imagination and your work being analyzed in academia.
Hey, listen, I could form universities on the unnecessary study of white people's shit. So, nothing personal, but I think we've had about 2 millenniums enough of white people's shit. And nothing personal, absolutely nothing personal. Some of my best friends are white, ha ha ha. Nothing personal. Some of my favorite books are written by whites. Nothing personal, but really, it's gonna damage the planet that some people of color get a little fucking attention in this motherfucker. Like, yeah, I mean, again, people like me are often used as the way to prevent another 20 million from being given the status and the respect they deserve. And unfortunately, a lot of people of color want to play the gatekeeper game. My shit is, I have never felt safe in this fucking country being the only one. That is not what I do. You know, I don't have any of these programs. I don't do this work because I think I want to be the king. Like most of us, I want to be irrelevant. I want to be in a community where my voice is so unneeded because we have so many voices. That's our dream. So I'm glad for the focus, but for me, it's both just an evidence of how deeply entrenched the logic of white supremacy is, that we are still super marginalized in all of these institutions. Yeah, I'm telling you, man, the amount of epistemic violence directed at us. Just good 4 years of college here, and no matter how nice they are, you are a fucking war veteran in this piece. People of color, women, poor folk, queer folk, we know, we sit in these fucking classrooms, and these people do damage on us and expect nothing to come back. The amount of shit, and it's endorsed from the top down. You do not know how many professors are up in there co-signing this shit. Well, you know because you're in the classes. Co-signing this shit as conversation. The attack and hatred against you because this is open intellectual debate. That's funny. That's very funny. As they point out, the very nature of neutrality replicates inequality. And that's what these classrooms are. They're like, oh, we're neutral. We're neutral. Fuck poor people, fuck brown people, fuck immigrants. That's their neutrality. And I think that for me, you know, when I see a bunch of scholars getting together and being like, let's write about a woman. Let's write about a black woman. Let's write about a queer black woman immigrant. That is nothing less than exactly the corrective slap in the face that this entire system needs. And it needs about 43 billion of them before it will wake the fuck up and realize that this hegemonic, patriarchal, white supremacist system has been holding us back now for 2 fucking millennium. And ya, coño. So, next one.
Muchas gracias.
Sí, muy amable.
Hi, Victoria, MIT alum. Woo-woo. But otherwise, I was going to say, your work has been both celebrated and criticized for its use of Spanglish and the centering of the immigrant experience. And I wonder how the white gaze / double consciousness of being a person of color in the US has affected your ability to be authentic in your art.
Yeah, I mean, authenticity is a funny ass question because I am as menaced by authenticity inside of my community as I am outside of it. I can't think of, if I had to devise what would be the internal monster of being an African diasporic person, it would be authenticity. Because that's the way that we've used this hobgoblin, this make-believe fantastic projection, this assemblage of diabolical, hegemonic, just distortions that we've used to torture each other. We're always looking at each other and saying, you ain't black enough, you ain't Dominican enough, you ain't poor enough, you ain't this, you ain't that, and that's from inside. By the time I got done with dealing with my community, who spent all its time trying to prove that I wasn't them, just as a way to act out their own internal pain at living in a place that didn't recognize them, live in a place that never allowed them to study who they were. I mean, think about it. White folks spend from the moment they awake to the moment they die studying what it means to be them. We get not even 10 seconds of mentorship, and yet we're creating these huge identities. Yet there's a lot of pain, and often we direct that pain at each other. And so by the time I got done with my community telling me about how inauthentic or authentic I was, by the time I got to the mainstream community, I had a lot of skills around this. And what I would argue is, for me, the question of identity is a fucking ruse. There is no such thing as an authentic anything. It's a great dream we like to hold. And even after you hear this, you'll still go home and be like, she doesn't speak Korean good enough? Fuck you, you ain't Korean. We'll still go home and do it. Because we cannot accept that authenticity has got nothing to do with individuals. Right? That we're communities made up of people who some speak perfect Korean, some speak less perfect Korean, but without both, the community doesn't exist. And so my thing is, as far as I am, I'm not trying to be authentically New Jersey. I'm not trying to be authentically Dominican. I'm not trying to be authentically, unrecognizably African diasporic. I'm trying to be this person who knows in their heart that they have lived inside of these communities in a very complicated way. And there's no way anyone's going to take that from me. They want to. And I'm not going to like bend over backwards and perform passport poses so people will let me over the border. You know, and I feel that that's often what we're asked to do. We're asked to prove ourselves. I'm done proving. I'm done because who are we proving for to the benefit of whom? That's not necessarily your question, but it's one that I've always been deeply troubled. And my thing is, no one can say anything to me about my work. You guys cannot say anything to me about my work. I can say nothing about my work. In other words, what a piece of fiction is and a piece of art is not valued by individuals now. Work exists for the future. And people could celebrate me today and have nothing to do with me tomorrow. And so people could recognize me as authentically Dominican today and be like, you're a fraud tomorrow. I've always thought of myself, I am writing for the future that doesn't exist yet, hasn't arrived. And so I'm not trying to be authentic to the now. The last thing we need is any more authenticity. We could use a little more queerness. Yeah. Thank you, though.
Thanks.
I wish I answered it a little better, but thank you. Did you mean like you're worried that like I'm writing for white people?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great answer, touched me deeply, but I was actually, but you're writing for white people, or just the feeling like you can't just be because you're always a force to exist as a other in American society.
Right, but but the thing is...
I guess it is our existence, like, and so...
No, but
it's not
look,
false.
But it's the same thing. It's like, what is your internal discussion around this stuff? In other words, what you're asking me, and I think this is an important question, what you're asking me is, do I have an internal discussion around this? Of course. The same way I have an internal discussion around white supremacy. In other words, like, if you're not talking to yourself about some of these things, then you don't have a relationship. You can't intervene. You can't even begin to map out what their hold is on you. I'm an immigrant. Believe me, I know what it means to live in a white gaze because it suddenly snapped on when I was 6. And so I remember when it appeared. And then it appeared in my mind like a burning eye. And so for me, that process has been a long-term relationship. And I would argue that that is equally a part of our internal journey. If you do not deliberate with yourself on how these regimes hold your heart, your bowels, your brain, your organs, then chances are they've fully colonized. There is no proof that we're not fully colonized. There's only proof, are we in discussion with ourselves or are we not? And if we're in discussion with ourselves, there's great hope. And that's my shit. I can't prove to anybody I'm not writing for white folks. And people can spend all their energy saying I am and I'm not, but you can't prove it. But I can tell you that for me to you, if I'm your friend, I would encourage you to be in that conversation with yourself because it will abate the burning eye. In fellowship, in solidarity, in conversation, this is how we overcome Sauron. Not in solitude. Not in solitude and not in the absolutist confidence that we've got it. Yeah, does that better?
Yep.
Thank you. Next one. Oh yeah, so what do we got, gang?
I hope this isn't a silly question, but on the sort of topic of telling immigrant stories, I was wondering if you had any thoughts, if you knew anything about the recent Broadway musical Hamilton and the idea of telling an immigrant story through, like, telling the immigrant story that is generally a story of white people that we think about, but like it isn't on stage anymore. And if you had any thoughts or feelings about that.
Cool. I'm going to take 3 questions. Next one. That's Hamilton. Remember that, Hamilton.
I'll be real quick. It's more about mechanics than like the content. You gave an interview when This Is How You Loser came out, saying that while a lot of the stories were written in second person, it's really difficult for you to do. So I was just kind of wondering, like, what was the process of you reaching to the point to say that rather than first or third, this is a story that needs to be told in second person?
Yeah, that one's real quick. The book is written by a writer, this persona, Junior, and part of what I needed in the book is this kind of strange folding in on itself to remind readers who were kind of grad student types that what they were reading is a production not of Junot Díaz, but of this identity, Junior, and the second person was an attempt to signal that as well. And so I needed this kind of strange recursive in it. I know, it's like, but it helped. Thank you. So, I know it sounded like bad, but it was really the answer. It's like I really wanted people to read it, to remember that between them and the words was this other person, this writer, who at the end of the book, you realize, wrote the whole book. Sir.
Hi. I also have a question on craft. So your prose has been described, like in the book blurbs, a lot as like caffeinated or frenetic or adrenaline fueled and those kinds of things, and I definitely would agree. But then in interviews, you've also said that you're like a notoriously slow writer, and it's a very painstaking process for you. So I'm kind of wondering how those two things get reconciled in the process of writing. Is it kind of like you always bring a ton of energy to your prose, even when you're not putting that much on the page, it's just going on off the page? Or is it sort of like you're putting so much attention into every line that the sort of packed nature of what you're writing causes it to be almost like people are reading it in fast motion of what you're writing?
Thank you. Hamilton, caffeinated. Next. I got you.
Hello. This might kind of already fit in with the authenticity identity stuff you were talking about earlier. But I was wondering why you decided to teach at MIT and whether you feel like an outsider in an environment that's super elite and privileged. And
Guys, I'm going to thank you. This one I can answer real quick. Guys, MIT has got nothing on a little institution called America. And I'm already a Dominican kid in America. Like, guys, I'm already there. As soon as I immigrated here, I was already in the big house of the big houses. So for me, the idea that MIT represents some further elaboration of this insanity is only the optics of it, you know? Again, all our spaces that we're at, there's a lot of fights to be had. There's a lot of kids of color at MIT. There's a lot of working poor, working class, and poor kids at MIT. There's a lot of folks who need all of us present. And so, you know, it's a great thing. I've worked at so many different kinds of schools. And always it's the same place in some ways, you know? The distance between MIT and my elementary school in New Jersey is very close. The distance between my elementary school and my first school in Santo Domingo is intergalactic. When it comes to privilege, yeah, I recognize it, but yeah. I'm already so overprivileged, it's incredible, just by being in the US. Cool. So, quickly, guys, surface effects, films, as you know, films are pieced together in in an industrial way. There's like 1 billion people working together to put a film, you watch it, and you're like, oh, that was fast. Same with literature. You could take fucking 6 years to write 3 words, and you read that shit, you're like, oh shit, that was crackling. You know? Narrative effects have very little to do with the narrative production. Yeah? Hamilton, again, Lin-Manuel Miranda is my boy. I came up with Lin-Manuel, me and his father were activists together. Came up as in like, now we grew up in the same neighborhood. The motherfucker's 20 years younger than me. But like, you know, and I gotta tell you, I just recommend people to go see Hamilton because I think what he's doing is very, very interesting, and I still need to see it a couple more times before I kind of wrap my head around it. I just think the kind of work that he's doing is very, very important. It's the same thing that many of us were doing. There's nothing new about what either of us were doing, like telling a kind of official history in Oscar Wilde from this kind of hip-hop perspective. That's not new. A lot of us have been up to this game, but I think it's something that's really interesting and that I think we just keep pushing that shit. Yeah? And these are the final ones, and you guys are out of here. You're good.
Hi, I work at a public library, and I want to return to the idea of a poetics of intimacy. And I and my colleagues, we try really hard to talk about the fact that we need diverse books. And we make a lot of concerted efforts to help our patrons understand, young and old, all the different narratives that are out there, as well as the ways in which characters are human. And one of the things that I often come across, and it's a big, big barrier, is trying to help people understand the humanity of somebody who isn't talking about token topics. We have oftentimes this way to associate people with, hey, you gotta talk about migration, you gotta talk about race, you gotta talk about sexuality in this way because you are X, Y, and Z. And rather than seeing the wide array of emotions and ugliness and beauty that make us who we are, I ran a discussion on Americana with some patrons, and patrons were saying, she's angry, she is just so hard to understand, why would she cheat on her boyfriend? And really, Ephemerate, the character of Adichie's novel, is incredibly complex and a woman striving to understand her identity. So my question to you is, how do we move beyond these narratives where we're, as people of color, we're trapped in repeating the same ideas, and beyond that, move back into the poetics of intimacy that inform who we are and help people understand the humanity of us. And thank you so much for coming today. You're amazing.
Thank you, very kind. Next two, let's drag them all out. Guys, you're very patient. We started at 7:10. What time is it? Shit, 10 minutes over. Let's do it.
Hi, my name is Miguel, and first, shout out to Cristo Rey Jesuit High School. That's my alma mater as well, the students who are here. But I wanted to ask you, so George Orwell's essay on Why I Write, he lists out a couple different motives on why he writes, and I think you might have kind of alluded to that when you mentioned Sandra Cisneros being your inspiration, but what's your take on why I write, and what are some of the motives and why you write?
Thank you.
Hey, you did an interview with Seth Meyers recently where you said that people who connect with your books oftentimes try and find something real in them beyond the fiction, beyond the lie, I think you said. So what is it about your work, or any work of fiction in particular, that you think causes people to try and find this real connection?
Cool. In high school, you're on notice because we're going to finish with you guys. Last question, all right? So, look, it's simple. Reading, we think reading is an intellectual practice. Reading is an embodied practice. You read a book, you feel it in your body. That feedback is real. When you're feeling a bunch of shit in your body, you're like, that's real. So when you look at the book, you're like, that shit made me do real things, so it's real. And it's a fast-forward version of it, but that's the truth. Your body reads books as they were true. Your mind is saying, well, it isn't. Who wins, usually? You know? That nervous system of the body is deep. All right? As far as why I write, guys, I said this to a group of other people. Gang, I have to tell you, writing is just an excuse for me to read. I mean, if I liked writing more, I would write more. I don't like writing that much. I love reading. You know? It's like, hey, some of us have talent in things we don't care a lot about, or we're not even that great at. I happen to have talent in something I'm not particularly great at. And that's okay. It's possible. But you can't discover that if you're not patient with yourself. You know? It is possible to have talent in something that you don't find comes easy. And so for me, writing, I write just because it allows me to read 1,000 books and call it work. And as far as that reading, I think we got to remember, like, guys, look, books belong to the readers. Yeah, people read books and they bring their fucked up projections to them. You can read a book and be like, oh, these people are like X, Y, and Z, but you got to have faith. People's relationship with books evolve. And if something starts out super ignorant, you never know if it's going to turn the corner. I'm sorry, I remember some of my readings when I was in college. I'm embarrassed when I think of the ways I raised my hands in college. It was like, and this is fuck. Shut the fuck up, yo. The same way, 10 years from now, I'm going to look back at this and lay in bed and tremble with a fever of shame. You know? It is okay, we evolve. And my thing is that, look, people only understand other people to their particularities. And no one is ever going to be able to connect to me if they dissolve my particularities. And I think we just keep going. We keep running these. I will always do book clubs because even if people don't read my shit in the way I would like them to read, I'm like, as long as you're reading, there's hope. And maybe my book is the book you misread, but my book helps you read the next one down the line better. And we've got to just have a lot of faith in this. But then again, I'm a reader that way. High school, you're going to wrap us up. What do we got? Wake up, say some crazy. Wait, didn't you just ask a question before? So you want to fuck me up again? Go ahead. One piece of writing that I've written and the piece I'm most proud of. You know what? I have to say something, and I have people in my life who are here with me, and they could probably tell you I'm absolutely not proud of any of my writing. For real, I can say the piece that I'm still angry at. Because for me, it might not show it, but like, I'm angry now. No, but I still have a grudge, man. I still got a grudge against Oscar Wilde because it took 11 years and it really I lost 4 girlfriends, so I should take the blame for that. 4 girlfriends, 6 apartments, and 2 jobs, and I'm still kind of pissed at it. I'm actually not kidding. You guys think I'm laughing? I look at that book some days and I get enraged. Which I shouldn't do since that's the book that gave me everything, quote unquote. But I'm still I want to punch it the fuck out. So, one more high school question and we're out. Come on, you guys. I know you got something. Yeah, you. Yeah. Word. Many view them as antagonists. Yeah. It's hard, right? It's that I grew up in this weird world And then I went to college, and I sat in college. I was at Rutgers University, very happy Rutgers boy, you know, even though they treated us like shit. You know, when I think of Rutgers, I think of the people we graduated with, you know. And I was at Rutgers, and I would sit inside of my African American Women's Studies classes. I had like 2 of them. And there would be this huge debate. You got to remember, this was 89, 90. There was this huge debate between a lot of the black American male writers and the black women writers. And the black male writers were accusing, like Stanley Crouch and them, and accusing Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, and all the women writers that they were like pathologizing the black community, that they were making black males look bad in the service of white people. And I remember sitting in these classes and being like, the dudes that Toni Morrison writes, she's making the guys I grew up with look good. And I was like, yo, they're complaining about that? That's a problem? Imagine if they actually met the people I grew up with. And so I kind of wanted to be a little bit more honest about the kinds of masculinity that we were not only grew up with, but we were encouraged to become. And it's not easy to read, it's not easy to encounter someone when you break open their heart. We're not perfect. If somebody could read your mind and could see what you've been up to for the last few years, a lot of us wouldn't be like extremely proud of it unless you're like a psychopath, you know? We're not perfect, you guys. We're not perfect. We're not perfect. We're not perfect. And if you have privilege in certain areas, chances are you're even less perfect to the people who don't have privilege. But just because Junior is flawed, just because he is damaged, he doesn't come out of nowhere. The charge is not only laid at his feet. There's an entire community responsible for the creation of people like Junior. His injuries are collective. His reactions are collective. We can all pretend that the problem is these bad guys, but the problem is we have communities that systematically produce these kinds of identities. And I just thought that even though Junior's fucked up, he's not a figure without hope. He's not a figure that we can't look to and say, hey, listen, for all of his problems, he's struggling. At least he's making an effort. It's not that that overcomes everything he's done, but I just feel that that speaks to who we really are. Most of us are imperfect. Most of us have done much harm to people across our privilege. Most of us deeply want to become better, and we don't know how. And it's easy to write about when you've already figured it out, because that gets us all off the hook. It's that transcendent crap we all love so much in this country. But that's not the reality. The reality is most of us struggle with ourselves, with no guides, no maps, afraid to reach out. And yet that doesn't mean that we are not worthy of sympathy, compassion, and love, no matter what our imperfections. Thank you.